Hello, friends. Kat here. How are you? Um, Many years ago, back in the 80s, I used to go to see Dr. Stuart Grayson speak at Alice Tully Hall in Lincoln Center on Sundays with my at the time girlfriend Adrienne. And Stuart Grayson taught New Thought from the New Thought movement, and specifically the text was The Science of Mind by Ernest Holmes. This resonated with me deeply as truth, really, and has since then. All these years, it has stuck with me and has become a foundation upon which my whole kind of existential reality is built on. It's an interesting history to the textbook. The original book, The Science of Mind, was written in 1926. The textbook that is presently used by practitioners of the science of mind, centers for spiritual living, religious science, New Thought movement, is a revised edition of The Science of Mind that was published in 1938. And there are some interesting omissions in the 1938 edition. I've prepared some notes, and I'm just going to read them. I need to give a shout out to Jim Lockhart and his blog, The New Thought Evolutionary, which I'm paraphrasing pretty heavily from here, but I'll just read it and it'll give a little bit of a summary. The New Thought principles emerged during the latter part of the 19th century, mostly in America, and trace their lineage through Ralph Waldo Emerson and the Transcendentalists, Phineas Parkhurst, Phineas Parkhurst Quimby, Mary Baker Eddy, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, and Ernest Holmes. Essentially, New Thought principles, which are based on ancient wisdom, say that there is an infinite creative power that created out of itself our universe and everything in it. This power, being infinite, transcends all and includes all. Everything in our universe is energy and intelligence. The interaction of these two basic elements of being create everything that exists. As self-aware beings, humans have evolved the capacity to use their minds to create their individual, unique experiences of their existences. Our thought is our key to our experience of life. A greater experience of life is achieved by the expression of our authentic inner qualities. Our outer experience of life is a reflection of our inner state of mind and emotions. By changing the inner, we generate change in the state of the outer. Again, the primary textbook used in the religious science movement is The Science of Mind, written in 1926. This is a copy of the published, which is in print. This is the original version, the 1926 version. You can get it on Amazon. Although the book was published in 1926, it is the revised text published in 1938 that is the version that is used from that point forward. Why? Sections of the original text were considered controversial in the mid-1930s. The two sections that were completely left out of the 1938 revision were Lesson 6, The Law of Psychic Phenomena, and Repression and Sublimation, which is a special article having to do with sex and gender. Here are some excerpts of the sections that were omitted in the Science of Mind by Ernest Holmes, 1938 revised edition, which again is the edition that is presently regarded as the definitive text. Was this censorship? I don't know. I'll let you be the judge. But as I get into it and start to understand some of the stuff that's in it, maybe you can understand why it was omitted from the 1938 version. So this is how it starts, and then it gets deeper and into some stuff, and I'm not going to read all of it. But I've written out kind of the first few pages of it, and I'll read it to you because I got nothing else to do. I'm about a month in to my coronavirus COVID-19 related furlough from my job, and it's Monday. Actually, it's around 4:00 on the 20th of April. So I'm exactly, as of March 20th, I was furloughed. I'm exactly a month in. So since I have a little time, I figured I'd do this. In case any of you who are familiar with the Science of Mind, the teaching text as it exists today, and have never read the original 1926 text and are curious, here you go. I'll fill you in a little bit on what it says without you having to actually go out and buy it. Lesson 6, psychic phenomena. Psyche means soul. Psychic phenomena are the phenomena of the soul. We have already seen that what we call the soul is really the subjective part of us. We do not have two minds, but we do have a dual aspect of mentality in what we call the objective and the subjective phases of mind. The objective mind is that part of the mentality which functions consciously. It is the part of us which really knows itself. Without it, we would not be real or conscious entities. Our subjective mind is our mental emanation in universal subjectivity. It is our individual use of mental law. It is also the avenue through which instinctive man works, carrying on the functions of the body, for it is the silent builder of the body. The subjective mind of the individual is the working of the instinctive man within him or her, plus all of his or her conscious and subconscious experiences. The subjective mind is the seat of memory and of instinctive emotion. Being the seat of memory, it contains a remembrance of everything that has ever happened to the outer man or woman. This memory is perfect and retains every experience of the individual life. The subjective mind also contains many of the family and mass cultural characteristics which have been experienced by the individualized man. It retains these memories, partly at least, as mental pictures or impressions. This is proven by the fact that observations have been taken of the subjective thought and definite outlines developed. This does not necessarily mean that every impression is retained as a mental picture, but that in all probability, anything that the outer eye has definitely seen is retained as a more or less distinct picture. The subjective mind is a picture gallery upon whose walls are hung the pictures of all the people whom the individual has ever known and all the incidents which he has ever experienced. The subjective mind, being deductive only in its reasoning powers, is compelled by its nature to retain all the mental impressions that it has ever received. It, therefore, contains much that the objective mind has never consciously known. When we realize that the individual's subjectivity is his use of the one subjective mind, we shall see that a subjective unity is maintained between all people, and that individual mentalities, which are in sympathetic vibration with each other, must more or less mingle and receive suggestions from each other. This is the meaning of mental influence. This is indeed a very real thing. This also means that the subjective mind also receives suggestions from the community and culture and is more or less influenced by its environment. All this takes place on the silent side of life and is mostly unknown to the receiver. Each individual carries around with them and has written into their mentality many impressions which they never consciously thought of or experienced, for there is a silent influence going on at all times between people. It is almost certain that between friends there is at all times a silent communication, a sort of unconscious mental conversation going on subjectively. When this rises to the surface of consciousness, when this rises to the surface of conscious intelligence, it is called telepathy. This communication with others is going on at all times, whether the conscious mind is aware of the fact or not. We are always receiving impressions that are more or less vague, and it is seldom that they come to the surface. They are there, nevertheless, and are gradually building into our mentalities impressions and forms of thought that are unconsciously and silently perceived. Since the subjective mind is the storehouse of memory, it retains all that the eye has seen, the ear has heard, or the mentality has conceived. Since it contains much that the outer person never consciously knew, and it is the receptacle of much of the cultural and communal knowledge through unconscious communication, it must and does have knowledge that far surpasses the objective faculties. Realizing that the subjective draws to itself everything that it is in sympathy with or vibrates to, we see that anyone who is sympathetically inclined towards a culture or vibrates to the culture or culture thought might pick up the entire culture or the entire culture emotion and experience. And if they were able to bring it to the surface, they could consciously depict it. Many of the world's orators, actors, and writers have been able to do this, which explains the reason why many of them have been so erratic, for they have been more or less controlled by the emotions which they have contacted. Our greatest speakers are able to contact the subjective mentality of their audience, and in this way, not only to tell their audience what it wishes to be told, but also to send out a strong vibration that will make an equally strong subjective impression on those who are listening. It is a well known fact that many speakers are able to connect with the mentality of an audience in such a manner as to be able to completely control it. Napoleon seemed to be able to do this, which was one of the reasons why he had such tremendous influence over his followers. Singers and poets generally enter into more or less of a subjective state while singing or writing. It might work the other way, it does work the other way. That is, they might themselves awaken the emotion in their hearers. This we call temperament. And no singer, speaker, or actor can be a great success without it. In the case of the writer, this enables him to enter into the cultural thought and perfectly depict cultural emotion and cultural endeavor. Poets are an especially good example of this ability, for poetry, like song, is the language of the soul, and none can write good poems unless they allow the soul to come to the surface. We could not imagine a great poem written mechanically. Artists lose themselves in their work, and musicians often do the same. This we call inspiration. In preaching, it is probable that the orator of the pulpit often so enters into the longings of people's hearts that they reveal the listener's longings to the listeners themselves. They are able to depict the listener's thoughts and emotions, and coupling their own with the listener's, give birth to a great discourse. We say that they are inspired. Anyone contacting the subjective side of a cultural mentality who has the ability to permit it to come to the surface will have at their disposal a knowledge that many lifetimes of hard study could not possibly accumulate. If one had to surrender their individuality in the process, they would be better off remaining ignorant. Enough has been said on this subject to show the source of human inspiration. There is, of course, a much deeper seed of knowledge than the subjective mind, and that is the spirit. Direct contact with spirit is illumination and is a quality which has been developed in but few people. The few who have developed this quality have given the world its greatest literature, religion, and law. Each person has a mental atmosphere which is the result of all that they have thought, said, done, and consciously or unconsciously perceived. This mental atmosphere is very real and is that subtle influence which constitutes the power of personal attraction. For personal attraction has but little to do with looks. It goes much deeper and is almost entirely subjective. This will explain the likes and dislikes for those with whom we come in daily contact. We meet some only to turn away without a word, while others we are at once drawn toward and without any apparent reason. This is the result of their mental atmosphere or thought vibration. No matter what the lips may be saying, the inner thought outspeaks them, and the unspoken word often carries more weight than the spoken. As Emerson said, "What you are speaks so loudly that I cannot hear what you say." In contacting people, we are instantly attracted to or repelled according to the vibrations which we feel A person whose atmosphere is one of love and sunshine, whose nature is to be happy, who lives a clean, wholesome life in a free atmosphere, will always attract friends. Children feel mental atmosphere very keenly and are drawn to those who are inwardly right, shunning those who are inwardly wrong. It has been truly said that people whom children and dogs do not like are dangerous. Animals are almost entirely subjective and feel mental atmospheres more keenly than most people. A dog instinctively knows one's attitude toward them, and acting accordingly is immediately a friend or foe. Personal atmospheres vary in their intensity, there being as many varieties as there are people, for each creates their own atmosphere in mind. The chapter goes on and talks about a lot um, of different aspects, and I'm not going to read all of it, but I'll tell you what it goes into briefly, just to name some of the headings. Uh, the psychic phenomena lesson goes on to explore how to create personal charm, the atmosphere of places, the collective cultural mind, which actually in the book it really says race mind, but I'm not saying that. The mind of history, telepathy, tuning in on thought, mental pictures, conditions necessary for the best results. Deep telepathic messages, reading the history of the individual, personal readings like tarot and the like, streams of consciousness, no obstructions to thought, entering the stream of thought, the vibrations of a book, why saints have seen Jesus, many mental pictures, the human aura, halo, unpleasant atmospheres, habits, mania, obsession, personal influence and obsession, obsession of discarnate spirits, general theory of obsession and mental influence, insanity, the psychic power must be controlled, the normal state, the aim of evolution, the state of trance, normal psychic capabilities, abnormal psychic powers, clairvoyance, psychometry, clairaudience, independent voices, apparitions, ghosts and phantasms of the dead. Ghosts sometimes can speak, projecting the mentality, crystal gazing, black magic, the modern curse, automatic writing, independent writing, Hudson's theory, smelling where there is nothing to smell, grasping objects without the hand, telekinetic energy, table tipping, wrappings, theory of ectoplasm, levitation, the spirit of prophecy, and so on. And it goes, it doesn't really go into a lot of depth in all those things. And then at the end of lesson 6, which is a recapitulation, a handy summary, the cliff notes, if you will, which I'll just go ahead and read right out of the book. Psychic phenomena are the phenomena of the soul or subjective mind. The subjective mentality is man's atmosphere in universal mind. It is the seat of his memory and the avenue through which instinctive life works. The subjective mentality, being deductive only in its reasoning power, is compelled to retain all of the impressions that it receives, but of course, these impressions can be erased consciously. Man is universal on the subjective side of life, and in this way is connected with the subjectivity of all with whom he is in harmonious vibration. Mental suggestion operates through the subjective mind, and a silent influence is always going on through this avenue in the form of a mass cultural suggestion. A silent communication takes place at all times between friends on the subjective side of life. When it comes to the surface, it is called mental telepathy. The subjective mind being in contact with the race thought, it says race thought. I don't like that. I call it the uh, the the cultural thought or the mass cultural thought. Now you got to bear in mind this is 1926. When they say race thought, they don't mean race thought the way we now think of race thought. So I don't really want nasty comments. I'm not going to say it the way it's written in the book. Okay. Um, okay. The subjective mind being in contact with the mass cultural thought has a much greater knowledge than the conscious mind. It is through this avenue that human inspiration comes. Orators and actors contact the subjective side of their audiences and in this way wield a tremendous influence. Singers, poets, and writers enter the subjective mass cultural thought and interpret it. This enables them to depict the mass cultural emotions. Each person has a subjective mental emanation or atmosphere, which is the result of all that has ever been consciously or unconsciously said, thought, or done by that person. I read that before. The mental atmosphere of a person is his power of attraction. It is the result of his inner thoughts. The mental atmosphere of a place is the result of all that has been thought, said, or done in that place. The mental atmosphere of a place is its power of attraction. We love those places whose mental atmosphere is one of love and peace. This is why we like our homes. The home should always be kept sacred, and its atmosphere should always be one of love. Things are possessed of a soul element and continuously emanate this atmosphere. Things, meaning objects, are possessed of a soul element, meaning they have a soul element, and they continuously emanate that. Each city or town has a special atmosphere, which is the result of the mental emanations of those who inhabit it. The same may be said of nations. Each has its national mentality. The history of the whole race, or mass culture, if you will, is subjectively written on the unseen walls of time and may be reproduced by one who can read the mass cultural mentality. Telepathy, which is the, I'm sorry, I don't mean to laugh. Telepathy, which is the act of reading subjective thought, takes place through the medium of universal subjectivity. In order to mentally receive a message and bring it to the surface, one must be in tune with the vibration of that message. Since the whole field of subjectivity is universal, it follows that everything that has ever been thought, said, or done is retained in the mass cultural thought. And since this field is a unit, All of the vibrations are ever present and may be contacted at the point of anyone's mentality. In this subjective state, man or woman, people are separate and distinct, but on the subjective side of life, they are universal. The conditions necessary for the best results in psychic work are faith and expectancy. This is because the subjective mentality is the seat of the instinctive emotions and responds to feeling. A psychic going into more or less of a subjective state is able to enter the vibration of an individual's thought and read from the book of their remembrance. The personal reading seems to be limited to the subjective remembrance, although this is often very far reaching. Each maintains a stream of consciousness in the one mind, and anyone contacting this stream may objectify it. Because of the universality of the medium, the individual stream of consciousness is always omnipresent, whether the one from whom it emanated be in the flesh or out of it. Time and space are unknown in mind. The past and the present are one. In reading the thought of people set down in books, we enter their vibration, and in studying their thoughts, we enter their stream of consciousness. Everyone who ever lived on earth has left behind a mental picture of themselves. These pictures are often seen when one is in a subjective state. This does not mean that we really see the person. What we see generally is the picture. The human aura is the mental vibration or emanation of the individual. The idea of the halo surrounding the heads of the saints is explained in this way. The personal atmosphere varies with the changing thought and emotion and is sometimes pleasant and at other times unpleasant. Habits are formed through conscious thought becoming subjective and in its turn controlling the one through whom it operates. Mania is a strong desire, subjectified, which becomes an obsession. People may become obsessed with their own ideas or with those that operate through them from some foreign source, whether this source is from someone in the flesh or out of it. Obsession is always some form of mental suggestion. Insanity is the loss of the objective faculty. The psychic power must always be controlled. A normal state is a perfect balance between the objective and the subjective faculties. This is the aim of evolution, to produce a man who, at the point of his objective faculty, may perfectly control the subjective. A trance state is abnormal, and only that psychic faculty is normal which is under full control of the self discerning mind. Clairvoyance is the ability to see without the physical eye. Psychometry is a clairvoyant state wherein the medium is able to enter the subjective side of things and read the atmosphere surrounding them. This is why mediums often wish to hold some familiar object in their hands while giving readings. Clairaudience is the ear of the soul. Independent voices sometimes come from the air, proving that some inner power is able to express itself audibly. Apparitions are thought forms and may come from the living or from the dead. At times, they come as warning. Crystal gazing is for the purpose of concentrating the mind in order that it may be that it order in order that it may become subjective. Black magic, the curse of malpractice, all mean the use of thought power for destructive purposes. Automatic writing takes place when the arm is under control of the subjective mind of the operator or by the subconscious mind of someone else, either in the flesh or out of it. It is a form of suggestion, either conscious or unconscious. Independent writing is where the pencil writes without physical contact. This shows that some inner power has the ability to grasp solid objects without physical contact. Table tipping and rappings are from the same source. It is thought by some that these manifestations come from the agency of what is called ectoplasm, or a subtle emanation of the body. This theory, however, does not explain all of the facts. Mind alone can do this. Levitation, or the ability to move the body, is another fact well known to investigators. The power of prophecy is limited to some subjective tendency already set in motion, for mental tendencies cast their shadows before them. There is a higher power of prophecy which contacts the cosmic purposes and reads the thought of God. Man reproduces on the mental plane all of the physical faculties. Immortality. Immortality means that the individual shall persist after the experience of physical death, carrying with him a complete remembrance and an unbroken stream of consciousness. For if man be immortal, death cannot rob him of anything. Man cannot conceive of himself either as being born or as dying. He lives and cannot think of himself from any other standpoint. Even though a person should conceive of himself as dying and imagine his own funeral, he would still have to conceive of himself as consciously being there, and so prove that he did not die at all. It is the same with birth. We can imagine being born into this world, but we cannot imagine the self as being non existent, for while thinking of the self as being born, we are still consciously thinking, thus proving that we were before we were physically born. All inquiry into the truth starts with the self evident proposition that life is. When man first woke to self-consciousness on this plane, he already had a body. Consciousness always clothes itself in some kind of form. Matter from which the body is made is a fluent substance, forever taking the form that intelligence gives it. It flows in and out like a river. We yearly immortalize ourselves so far as the body is concerned. The ether, being more solid than matter, proves that we could have a body within the one that we now occupy. Since matter in form is only a certain rate of vibration, it follows that in dealing with infinite life, we are dealing with an infinite number of vibrations. Consequently, We might have a body within a body to infinity. In reality, the body is a spiritual idea. The flesh simply covers it for the purpose of providing a physical instrument through which spirit may function on this plane. Man departs this body only to find himself already equipped with another one. He carries with him every attribute that he now possesses and goes forth in complete retention of his individuality. Since there is but one mind, it follows that it is possible to communicate with the departed, but as the communication must come through the subjective, it is difficult to receive clear messages, and it is impossible to know whether or not the ones with whom we think we are communicating are consciously present. It is never safe to go into a trance state in order to communicate with the departed, as in so doing, one might subject oneself to the mental influences of lesser mentalities. Individuality is sacred and must never be tampered with, nor controlled, except by the conscious mind. The value of an understanding of psychic phenomena lies in the fact that they are the phenomena of mind and must be accounted for. Every plane reproduces the one just below or just above it. Psychic phenomena are the reproductions on the mental plane of the principle just below the mental, which is the physical. That is the recapitulation of this section of the science of mind that was deleted from the 1938 version. One of them, lesson number 6, the law of psychic phenomena. This is removed from the present version of the book. And maybe you can, take a stab at why they did that. I mean, this is pretty racy stuff for 1938. That pretty much concludes this part, this entry, this video. I will do a follow-up on the other section that was deleted from the 1938 edition of The Science of Mind. And that is called repression and sublimation, which has to do with sex and gender. So look for that. I'll probably do that tomorrow. And that's pretty much all I got for the moment. So I hope you found that interesting. I did. Okay. Everyone be well. Stay safe. See you soon.